Ary Rosenbaum here with another fun-filled episode of that 401k podcast. This week's topic, we're going to talk about what good plan providers would fix first if they took over a plan sponsor's 401k plan tomorrow. First things first, go to that 401ksite.com to sign up for all our events. Of course, in about a month, we got Chicago, April 16th, May 5th, Colorado, Denver. And I think that's what we're probably just going to do for 2026. I thought about Washington, and I'm probably going to save that for 2027. I think right now I'm looking at maybe doing 2 events a year, and that's it. It's just, back in the old days, pre-COVID, people would like to attend events and whatnot. It's just I've found over the last couple of years, it's just getting more and more difficult to hold these events. And get help. And, I think I may mention a story. One of the plan providers for Chicago completely wigged out on me. But that's probably left said for another day. It was one of those situations where they had issue that I charge, only $100 a head for advisors to attend, $50 for multiple attendees for the same firm. And the reason I charge is to make sure that they show up. That's what we call having skin in the game. Been too involved with free events where people RSVP and then don't show up because they have something better to do than attend the free event. But anyway, go to that 401ksite.com to sign up, as well as going to Amazon, Kindle, paperback, that 401k plan provider handbook, as well as a full circle available on Kindle and in paperback. So let's get to the topic at hand. I like Broadway musicals, which the number one favorite show of all time by far, up and away, is Les Mis. Two, I don't know, Chicago's up there, high on my list. Tommy. My Fair Lady's pretty good. Quite a few shows out there, but far and away, Les Mis is my favorite show. And I think I first saw it when I think I was like 17 years old, and it was on forever at Broadway. And the only funny story I have about September 11th, because the absurdity of it, is I had tickets to go see Les Mis on September 11th, 2001. I was going to go with my wife that night, and I think the show closed maybe, a few months later or a year later, whatever it was. And, as you know, on September 11th, 2001, a little bit before 9 o'clock, the planes struck the first tower. Then I forget the timeline. And, that was a day that in my life, if I could take back, probably number one on my list, even worse than, my grandparents dying or whatnot. And I forget what time it was. Maybe it was like 12-ish. The towers collapsed, and at that point, you don't know how many people are alive or dead. And I remember there was talk that there were other plane crashes, that there was like a fire near the Capitol, and this and that. You didn't know what to make and all that stuff. And I have tickets for that night, and my mother calls me. Actually, it might have been, I think my mother was still teaching, and I think if you read my books, you know how difficult my mother was. And she calls me up and she says, and I'll use my impression of her because she has this very high, shrieking voice, but it was, Ari, you're not going to go to the show tonight, right? And I said, Mom. At that point, they had evacuated Manhattan Island south of Canal Street, and the Long Island Railroad wasn't running, and I think there were 10,000 people dead. And I said, somehow I don't think there's going to be a show tonight. And of course, there wasn't, and I think it was for days and days. There was no Broadway. And needless to say, I did get a refund for my tickets, but that was the absurdity of it. And my favorite song from that show is "One Day More." And so when I was thinking of this um, article, I was thinking about "One Day More." If you even see the movie, and the movie is a fantastic version of the show, and very few movies are as good as the show you see on Broadway or performing. And that was a fantastic movie. And it just, to me, that's why I wanted to talk about it. Because a lot of these articles that I write, and these podcasts are based on the articles that I write. Um, you know, these are the idea is, plan providers would give out these articles, and what better article to give to plan providers than talking to plan sponsors on what would it look like if they hired better providers. So, most 401k plans out there have been patched together over years, like the crooked streets of 19th century Paris. And, so many things go wrong. Forms don't really match procedures. The website says one thing while the enrollment guy says another. And, nobody knows really what's going on. And a smart plan provider out there is going to perform a daylight inspection. They are going to review the plan top to bottom, and they are going to, you know, not shame the prior advisor or TPA, whatever it is, but they're going to make sure the lights actually work. There are so many plans out there where participants, had loan defaults or defaulted into the wrong fund lineup and all that kind of stuff. And fixing street lamps. It's like basic, and it does more for participants than any trendy ESG fund will ever do. And competence isn't really exciting, but it is refreshing, and it's important to fix the broken street lamps. Fees without poetry. If there's one villain in our industry, it's really the lack of transparency around fees. And a new plan provider out there is going to translate expenses into plain English before selling a single new service. They lay out what the record keeper charges, what the advisor receives, and how revenue sharing sneaks around like thinner deer counting coins in a dark inn. Um, there are plan sponsors who believe their plan was free, because the invoices said that they were and all that stuff. But the illusion kind of ends under a good provider. Transparency isn't just a regulatory word; it's the foundation of trust. And when fees are understood, decisions become adult conversations rather than, hostage negotiations. The best plan providers out there don't promise to be the cheapest. They promise to be honest about the cost of running a serious retirement program. In my experience, sponsors accept reasonable expenses when they finally see what they are really buying. Uh, it's important for a good plan provider out there. They will take over a plan, and they're going to have an investment that matches real lives. Uh, you know the fund lineup really has to reflect the workforce. Uh, a responsible plan provider is really going to look at the demographics, turnover, and savings behavior before rearranging the lineup. If half the employees out there earn under 50K, the plan is going to need guardrails and simplicity. Um, you know, Target date funds should be evaluated for the glide path and all that stuff. And good plan providers out there are going to remember behind every ticker symbol is really someone hoping to pay a mortgage or help a kid through college. Les Mis kind of teaches us the idea that revolutions are fought by ordinary people, and so are retirements. Investment design has to serve those ordinary people rather than the consultant's brochure. And education is really an important part of, you know, um, it's such an important part and parcel of what we do here in the retirement plan business. Most enrollment meetings, I jokingly say they're, I've seen, funerals that are livelier, and um, Some enrollment meetings are like a interrogation by Javert. You know, some sign-in sheet and a talk down to and all that stuff. And if I took over a plan tomorrow, I certainly would replace that ritual conversations that really respect adult anxiety. People don't want sermons; they don't want to be talked down to. I think that that's something that you know I felt like working for other people. You don't want to be talked down to like you're some kind of idiot. You know, participants don't need sermons or being talked down to. They really need help deciding whether to save 6% or 8 when their rent went up or cost of living went up and all that kind of stuff. A good plan provider is going to train managers to speak about the plan. They will speak about the plan the way they speak about health insurance. It's got to be practical, human, and ongoing. Technology is obviously a big plus, but no app is going to replace a real explanation delivered at a lunch table. Education should be a duet, not a monologue. When people understand why the plan exists, the referral rates rise without gimmicks. I've seen a 5-minute hallway chat accomplish more than 100 glossy flyers. Compliance without terror. ERISA, kind of has that reputation like the Paris police. Powerful, mysterious, and occasionally unforgiving. However, most compliance mistakes aren't crimes. They're just paperwork tragedies. A new plan provider is going to organize the plan documents into a file. They're going to organize a calendar, procedures, all that kind of stuff. And really importantly, to have the plan sponsor, learn from them to how to breathe during an audit. Um, a good, plan provider isn't going to just focus on that annual census information. It's going to be a situation where they create a routine that is going to fit the company's rhythm. Payroll files should certainly be tested before the Form 5500 deadline, not after the DOL letter arrives. Loans and hardships should follow written procedures. Compliance should feel like maintenance on a reliable train, not a guillotine waiting to fail. When sponsors understand the rules, they become partners rather than defendants at some sort of trial. Um, and there's got to be, you know, good plan providers are going to provide a service with a name and a face. I tell you, sometimes the worst things is recently my daughter is traveling abroad as part of school and all that stuff, and she's using the Visa credit card. I prefer Amex because I like my Delta miles, and American Express isn't really taken overseas, so Visa is the way to go. So I got this JetBlue Visa, whatever it is, and every time she would, order tickets on the train, there was like a situation where there would be a fraud alert, and I'd get the text, and they would reject her purchase, and I previously told them that she was away and buying stuff and whatnot, and then she'll be expected home at the end of May. And 3 or 4 times I had to be on the phone to explain why am I getting this fraud alert, and just the service, just like you're getting, that you're getting sent off to a faraway place for the helpline, probably somewhere in Asia. And that's really infuriating. And, with plan participants, nothing, is going to accept anger employers more than calling a helpline that kind of treats them like prisoner for 24601. And a plan provider taking over tomorrow is going to assign real humans who answer emails before the second act ends. And that's service is really important in this business. And I've always liked the TPA approach where you have one person who is your day-to-day contact instead of calling up and some random guy answers the phone who's never had anything to do with your plan. Um, and I've seen good providers, talk about how many participants have called, what's the wait time, and all this kind of stuff. And there's so many plans out there that have lost years of goodwill because the beneficiary form sat in a queue while the window waited for distribution. Service really is not a luxury. It is the melody that keeps the whole production moving. The best plan providers out there know the payroll clerk's dog's name and the owner's vacation schedule. Familiarity prevents small issues from becoming barricade sides battles. Technology, of course, is such an important part of our story. Every vendor is going to arrive promising a digital revolution, but good providers treat technology like scenery, not the star. They keep what works and discard what doesn't. If a record keeping portal requires a PhD to change a deferral, that's got to be redesigned. Data feeds between payroll and the platform should be tested the way orchestra pits tune instruments quietly and repeatedly. Automation is a great thing until it misclassifies an employee and nobody notices it for a couple of years. The right technology supports human decisions instead of replacing them. Tomorrow's provider would remember that software should reduce friction and not create more friction. Taking over a plan is certainly easy, but improving it is harder. And I've seen good plan providers show that, advisor could show like how many participants are showing up at the enrollment meetings, what's the deferral rate, what's the rate of return, how many people are, doing the target date plan and the target date funds and whatnot. It just always reminds me in the Oceanside Education, Oceanside School District, school board members by every metric. They've been on there forever, and they're constantly failing. By every metric, the school district is far worse off, but you can't bring that up. With plan providers, there are so many different ways you can measure the effectiveness through different metrics, whether they're TPA or an advisor. A thoughtful, plan provider out there is going to establish simple scorecards. Again, participation rates, the average referrals, fee ratios, participant satisfaction, and the good plan providers are going to review these metrics and show the improvement that they're doing. Improvements take time. They don't happen overnight. And when progress stalls, the provider should admit it and just fix it. What is working? What is not? It always goes back to No Country for Old Men. If the rule you follow led you to this, of what use was the rule? And I've always interpreted that if this is the way you've always been doing it and it's no longer working, what are you going to do to change your outcome? And that's just the nature of how I see life. If it's not working, you got to change your ways. Otherwise, you're always going to get the same results. Too many consultants out there declare victory after the conversion call and disappear into the wings. That's just the nature of it. Real good plan providers out there are going to stay for the long run, celebrating small wins and correcting mistakes without any drama. And again, One Day More. That's my favorite song of the musical. Confrontation is probably number 2. At the end of the day, is also pretty good too, and whatnot. Master of the House. These are all great songs, but One Day More, it's really my favorite song. It kind of captures that breath before change, the hope that tomorrow can be better if we are brave enough to act. And a 401k plan takeover should feel like that. Hope. Something good is going to happen. Good providers fix the basics first. They should sweep away the fog around fees, repair the operational street lamps, and speak to participants like neighbors instead of case numbers. If a plan provider walked into your office tomorrow, the plan would not become perfect overnight, but it would start moving towards improvement. And like Valjean stepping into a new life, sponsors and participants would discover that the future of their retirement story can change with a single determined day. I hope you enjoyed this episode of that 401k podcast. Of course, go to that 401ksite.com, sign up for all our events. Got some articles there and blog posts and whatnot. And go to Amazon, Kindle, paperback, Full Circle, as well as that 401k Plan Provider Handbook. And of course, tune in next week for another fun-filled episode of that 401k podcast. Take care. Bye.